One of the questions that comes up over and over and over as we watch Israel's relentless genocide of Gaza is what is the benchmark? What will it take for it to be too much? What will it take for it to be too much? At what point will there just be too many people dead, too many children dead, too many legs amputated, too many people starving for the Western nations to say enough? Now, there's a problem with this logic because it assumes that there is a red line. And this is not just a conflict between two regions that want control over a plot of land. This is symbolic for the West. As we've heard so many times, that wrapped up in Israel's victory is like the survival of the West or some kind of bullshit like this. Now, Canadians have just gotten a bit of a glimpse into the fact that there is no answer to how far is too far. It hasn't really been reported very much, though. So on April 1st, two very significant things happened. And I should say there's a lot of construction going on above my head. I've been trying to record this video all day and it's been so much noise. So if you hear construction noises or if I jump because something's fallen above my head, that's what's going on. So April 1st, two things happen. One, the first Canadian has been killed by Israel. It's Jacob Flickinger, and he's a Canadian-American dual citizen who grew up in the Beauce, which is the region just south of where I live, and who served in Canada's military with the Vandus stationed in my city, in Quebec City, and who does a tour of Afghanistan, okay? So a former Canadian soldier, a veteran, killed while doing aid work with the World Central Kitchen in Gaza. Okay, so right off the bat, it's like, Canadian who's doing aid work has been now killed by Israel. That seems like we've gotten into a new phase of this genocide in relation to Canada's interaction with this. You know, all of what I'm saying should not be taken from me ignoring the fact that, you know, far more than 35,000 people have been murdered in Gaza and their lives are really important and they matter. But from the very cynical perspective of Canada's role in this, I'm going to be speaking from that kind of normative place for this video. But there's a second thing that happened on April 1st as well. And so not only do you have a Canadian citizen who's from Canada, who served in the Canadian forces, who was a veteran because he left the Canadian forces, but Canada's embassy is damaged in an airstrike by Israel in Damascus, because the Canadian embassy is right beside the Iranian embassy in Damascus. Now, I had to go back and figure out at what point that happened, because the World Central Kitchen news, while the Canadian government, sent its condolences to Jacob Flickinger's family, they didn't really, they acknowledged it at least. But the embassy damage has not really been acknowledged by the Canadian government. Evan Dyer at the CBC has been trying to get Global Affairs Canada to talk about it. And it's trying to the extent that, 2 days ago, he wrote an article where the first line in the article is that the government doesn't want to talk about what happened in Damascus. So here's what we know. The Israelis target and bomb Iran's embassy, there's the noise, in Syria, in Damascus. And Canada's embassy is right beside. Now, the kind of missiles that were used, according to Evan Dyer's reporting, sent shockwaves through the ground. And so Canada's embassy had potentially windows blown out and needs to have, an engineer come and determine whether or not it was structurally sound. And Dyer's angle on this was, did Canada get a warning from Israel that they would be bombing the building right next door to the Canadian embassy? And his first article says that Global Affairs Canada wouldn't respond. And then the second article that came out yesterday, or maybe he said this on Twitter, said that they were not aware, they were not made aware by Israel before the bombing happened. Now, I think what is happening here, but the Canadian government is really hoping for, other than the fact that, huge news can break and then disappear so quickly these days, But the Canadian embassy was not operational. It's been closed since 2012. And that's a whole other problem with how Canada has been doing diplomacy in the last 20 years. When we're mad with a regime, we just close the embassy, which is like, okay, I mean, you can do that, but then you leave a lot of people in the lurch who need consular or embassy services, who then have to go to other countries. This has also happened, of course, in Iran, because Canada doesn't have consular services in Iran either, despite how many Iranians come to Canada every year. So, I mean, this is all on the foreign affairs plane, very silly that Canada never reopened or even closed in the first place its embassy in Damascus because of the war that was going on in Syria. So Dyer reports that while there was no operations happening there, over the years, Canadians have used the building. There are local staff that like maintain the building to make sure, you know, it doesn't crumble into disrepair. It is still the property of Canada. It's still Government of Canada property. And over the years, Dyer reports that, you know, folks, including the RCMP, have used the building for some purpose, which is like, whoa. What are the RCMP doing in Syria at our closed embassy? I'm sure there are journalists that are trying to figure that one out, if not Dyer himself. But on the same day, Canada's embassy and a Canadian are hit or impacted, ruined in the case of a building, or damaged in the case of a building, and killed in the case of Jacob Flickinger. And what is Canada's reaction to this? Nothing. But they're just like, oh, this is super sad that this guy died. And Israel, be more precise with who you're killing, is basically the message that comes out from Canada. Now, Melanie Joly, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has not even acknowledged that Canada's embassy was damaged in this airstrike. I went back through her Twitter feed back to August, back until April 1st. She doesn't mention the embassy at all, which is curious. And like, it just demonstrates that Canada will support Israel no matter what. It doesn't matter if our property is damaged or if a Canadian is murdered in a direct hit on aid workers. Canada's allyship of Israel knows no ability to be broken. We are so in solidarity with Israel. And this, I think, you know, it's very bad from the perspective of like, oh, okay, so there are no red lines actually for Canada supporting Israel. It means the only way that we can get them to stop supporting Israel is to not hope that other Canadian buildings or other Canadians are damaged, hurt, injured, killed by Israel. That our only hope is actually political pressure to make sure that someone like Melanie Joly is never elected again. That's the only way that we can win this. But it really does put into perspective like how little Canada, the government of Canada, actually cares about its own people and about, you know, asserting its sovereignty, its right to have embassies opened or closed in different countries, the right of embassies to, you know, not be like attacked, right? Israel is trying to goad Iran into responding with violence. And I mean, there's a lot of people holding their breaths around the world to see how Iran is going to respond to the fact that this airstrike killed 16 people, including 2 bystanders, right? It's just like, okay, Israel has a policy of not claiming responsibility for these kinds of attacks, but the United States has confirmed that Israel did it, which is like, I mean, you got your little brother, big brother, saying the little brother actually did stole the cookies or whatever. It's very ridiculous. And Canada goes along with this. So as you know, Israel prepares its ground invasion in Rafah, as Israel has withdrawn troops from certain parts of Gaza, and we're seeing, you know, lots of video footage coming out of just like the unbelievable destruction, we have to get it out of our mind that there's any level that will change the Canadian government's position on Israel, that there's any level of destruction or death that will actually change their minds on this. They are fully behind the murderous genocidal campaign of Israel, 100%. And any cracks in their solidarity and support from Israel to Israel is only because of the political pressure that we're able to put on them, which is why we have to continue to ramp up the political pressure and do everything we can to make their lives as uncomfortable as possible to try and convince them to stop supporting Israel in this. I mean, you know, this whole thing is so crazy making because you're just watching Israel destroy its own ability to ever have safety or security for the Israeli people. You're watching Israel just self-immolate in this ridiculous, violent, genocidal attack on people over who they've had a siege over, people who they have controlled for decades. And for Canada to be so wrapped up in the political order that we can't even announce that our own embassy was bombed by Israel, hit in the crossfire of Israel bombing Iran, that they didn't give us a heads up, that they didn't say, hey, Canada, watch out, we might blow the windows off of your embassy in Damascus. That seems like a level of geopolitical operations that is not something that Canada is used to, and that we are seeing the folks within the establishment don't really know how to react to. And so they're actually just doing basic crisis communications, which is like, you know what? This is an issue that's going to go away. No one's paying attention. There's only one journalist in Ottawa who seemingly cares about this. I mean, I know that there's actually more, and I really hope that we see other reporting from, I don't know where the maple is out on this stuff, but I'd be really curious to see if Alex Kosh can get any more information. Although dealing with Global Affairs Canada is a nightmare because they give you nothing. It's all statements, and the statements are pretty much vacant. But anyway, good luck to the journalists doing that work. And know that in our name, Canada is supporting what Israel is doing, even at the expense of Canadians being murdered by Israel, and even at the expense of dangerous situations being, put around our own property, if we care about property like that in other countries. And so as I said, like as Israel gets ramping up their plans, I guess, to invade Rafah and to turn Rafah into rubble the way that they've turned the rest of Gaza into rubble, pay close attention to how Canada reacts to this, because the death toll is going to climb. The desperation of Canadians who are trying to get people out of Rafah or out of other parts of Gaza is going to be more intense. And the pure incapacity that our government has to do anything that isn't literally the lapdog of the United States will be on full display. There's a lot of Canadians who grew up thinking that Canada is this peacekeeping nation that can actually do peacekeeping things. I think I don't remember what shitty media I saw saying like Canada needs to send peacekeepers to Gaza. I mean, that is all myth. And there's always been some level of myth to it as well. But Canada has not played that role in the world in decades. We have been 100% at the service of Western empire as defined by the United States. And as the last stand of the Western empire is on display right now in Israel's genocidal attack on Gaza, we are, of course, side by side with our genocidal partners, as we have been for the last 20 years. And so we have to get rid of this idea that there is any hope that Canada can do peacekeeping, that we are a peacekeeping nation. We are increasingly tied to rogue nations who don't give a rat's ass about international law. I mean, I'm saying all this stuff, and I've got like a speech from Chrystia Freeland running in my mind where she's talking about the liberal order and the shining city on the hill, and I wanted to vomit. And I think I heard the speech twice. And it's just like these people are just so disgusting and makes me want to fall over, to be honest. But keep up the pressure, keep up fighting in the streets. And if you are curious to get involved, as I said in other videos, World Beyond War, they're escalating their tactics. And so find your local World Beyond War chapter and see if you can get involved, because the red line's been crossed. If a Canadian veteran can be killed, if the Canadian embassy can be damaged in an airstrike that in very close proximity, there are no red lines for Canada. And we have to stop hoping that there will be some sort of, realization or logic or mea culpa that's going to change the minds of people like Justin Trudeau or Melanie Joly.